King Charles received a written legal opinion from his own lawyers, telling him he had lost. Not a negotiating position, not a suggestion to reconsider. A formal written conclusion from the King of England's own legal team, stating that his brother Prince Edward's position was virtually unbreakable, that no royal order could override what Queen Elizabeth had put in place, and that Charles had no legal ground left to stand on. That conclusion arrived on March 25, 2026, and it was the culmination of something that had been building quietly for years, a collision between a king who believed modernization gave him the right to restructure everything, and a younger brother who had apparently been keeping every single receipt. But here is the detail that makes this story genuinely extraordinary. Edward did not win this fight alone. Princess Anne walked into a room with King Charles and delivered a warning so specific and so targeted that it stopped the pressure campaign cold. And the line she used, one sentence delivered in the flat tone she reserves for things she has already decided, is the moment that changed everything. If our mother's signature on a lease or deed of gift is not worth the paper it's written on today, then your signature will be worth even less tomorrow. Welcome to the Marquee Report. This is the full story of how Prince Edward won the biggest internal royal battle in years, and what it means for the family going forward. Let's start with the assumption that caused this entire situation, because understanding Charles's position is essential to understanding why Edward's victory matters as much as it does. For years, Charles had operated under a belief that seemed obvious to him. As king, as the person who granted Edward the Dukedom of Edinburgh in April 2023, he believed he retained ultimate control over what came with it. The title, the property, the structure around it. He believed modernization and cost-cutting gave him the authority to review and, if necessary, reclaim what the crown had given. By 2026, that belief had turned into action. There were reviews of royal leases, financial audits, quiet pressure applied behind closed doors, and Bagshot Park, the 120-room Tudor Gothic mansion on 51 acres inside Windsor Great Park that serves as the seat of the Edinburgh Dukedom, became a target. The financial motive was not subtle. The property is currently valued at approximately £30 million. If the Crown Estate reclaims it, that asset becomes available for sale or lease at substantial profit. The pressure on Edward to surrender it was not about modernization alone. It was about £30 million sitting inside a lease that a future king now wanted back. Charles found out in writing on March 25, 2026, that he could not have it. Here is the detail that made Edward's legal position so strong, and that makes the pressure campaign against him look so extraordinarily unfair when you understand it. Bagshot Park was in terrible condition when it was offered to Edward in the late 1990s. The building had been used by army chaplains, and when they left, it was worn out, outdated, and largely ignored. The Crown Estate had seriously considered turning it into a hotel or conference center. That is how little value it held at the time. Instead, it was handed to Edward under a lease signed in March 1998. The terms were clear: £5,000 per year for 50 years. That low rent came with a significant burden. He had to restore the property, not slowly over time, but substantively. And he did. He invested £1.36 million of his own private money he had earned before becoming a full-time working royal. The total restoration cost reached nearly £3 million, with the Crown Estate covering a portion. Once the work was done, his rent was increased to £90,000 per year. The National Audit Office confirmed that figure represents market value. Then, in 2007, Edward paid an additional £5 million through his company to extend the lease to 150 years. He built long-term security. His agreement gave him the right to sell the lease and keep the profit. Compare that to his brother Andrew, who lived at Royal Lodge for years without ever paying market rate, documented by the same National Audit Office. One brother followed the rules, paid his own way, and invested his own money. The other did not. And now the institution that allowed that double standard was applying maximum pressure to the brother who had done everything correctly, while the Bagshot Park pressure was building a second and more personal attack arrived. Officials from Queen Camilla's office appeared at Bagshot Park, describing their visit as a routine jewelry audit, a national heritage review. What it actually meant was that someone had come to question jewelry Sophie had worn as her own for 25 years. At the center of that audit was the Anthem tiara. This was not a random item from a state vault. It was commissioned specifically by Queen Elizabeth II for Sophie's wedding in 1999. Built using 4 antique elements from Queen Victoria's private collection, shaped into a honeysuckle design. For nearly 2 decades, it was the only tiara Sophie ever wore, because unlike other senior royals, she was never given open access to the grand state pieces. The Anthem tiara was her one crown. Camilla's argument came through legal language, but the message was plain. Because the tiara incorporated gold and stones from the Victorian era, it could be classified as crown property, meaning Sophie would need to request permission each time she wanted to wear it. The implications went far beyond one piece of jewelry. If that argument held, it would open the door to reclassify dozens of personal gifts given by Elizabeth across her 70-year reign. And it would apply the same logic to Camilla's own collection, much of which came directly from royal sources. Edward's legal team saw that immediately, but there was something even more devastating in their response. Edward's lawyers responded with a document that shut the tiara argument down at its foundation. A deed of gift signed by Queen Elizabeth in 1999 stated explicitly that the Anthem tiara was classified as a private wedding present, not a state loan, not a shared asset, not something held in trust. It belonged to Sophie. Elizabeth had signed it. It was documented. It was final. But Edward had done something even more deliberate years earlier. In 1999, he had worked with royal jewelers to create a matching set of black and white pearl jewelry for Sophie, a necklace and earrings designed to complement the Anthem tiara perfectly. The materials were funded through the crown, but Edward held the design rights. His lawyers argued that the tiara and the pearl set formed a single artistic unit connected to his own design work. You cannot remove the tiara without breaking that unit. Another layer of legal protection that nobody in Camilla's office had anticipated. And behind all the legal architecture was something deeply personal. Sophie wore the Anthem tiara on her wedding day. It was given to her by the woman she would later call Mama, not in a prepared speech, but in a slip of the tongue at a reception in Buckingham Palace in front of senior royals when she turned to Elizabeth and the words simply came out. The woman who signed that deed was the woman she called her mother, and someone was now trying to take it away. Here is the moment that changed everything. Because what Princess Anne did on March 25, 2026 was not a legal maneuver. It was something more powerful than that. Anne walked into a private meeting with King Charles and went straight to the point. No small talk, no diplomatic cushioning, no effort to soften what she had come to say. She told Charles that if he allowed this to continue, if he allowed private gifts from their mother to be questioned, reclassified, or taken back, then the word of a monarch would mean nothing. Then she delivered the line that stopped the room. If our mother's signature on a lease or deed of gift is not worth the paper it's written on today, then your signature will be worth even less tomorrow. That line was not emotional. It was constitutional. It was telling Charles that a king's authority depends entirely on the credibility of what he signs, and that credibility does not begin with him. It comes from every monarch before him. Break that chain, and the entire system weakens. Anne had also reviewed the Bagshot Park documents herself. She knew exactly what Edward had paid what he had signed, and what the Crown estate had accepted. Her position was direct. Edward paid for that home. The Crown estate took his money under those terms. That agreement stands. There is nothing left to argue. She did not treat the tiara and the house as separate disputes. She made it clear they were the same fight. Both were things Elizabeth had personally given, backed by signed documents. If they succeed in taking one, they open the door to take the other. And once that door is open, nothing Elizabeth signed is safe. Then she threatened something that made the room go very quiet. She told Charles that if this continued, she would oversee a full audit of the Queen's household, not basic figures, but everything, expenses, staffing allocations, connected to Camilla herself. Princess Anne threatening a public financial audit of Queen Camilla is not a threat anyone in that palace could dismiss. She has the record, the credibility, and the will to follow through. By the end of March 25, 2026, 2 formal communications had been sent. A note from the master of the jewel house to Sophie confirmed the anthem tiara would remain under her exclusive private control. Short, direct. No apology for the audit, no acknowledgement of the pressure applied. Simultaneously, the review of Bagshot Park was shut down. The official wording described it as recognition of the Edinburgh household's role in maintaining the estate. Inside the palace, nobody misunderstood what had actually happened. The crown had stepped back. Everything Edward held was confirmed. The title, the home, the tiara. All of it standing exactly where Queen Elizabeth had placed it. Charles had written a private handwritten note to Bagshot Park, requesting a family meeting. The response he received changed the tone entirely. Edward refused to meet unless his full legal team was present. This was no longer a brother trying to keep peace. This was someone who understood exactly what was at risk and would not give an inch without documented protection. Once that line is drawn, it does not go back. Here is the honest assessment of what this fight has done to the monarchy that Charles is trying to run. 2 centers of power now exist inside the institution. At Buckingham Palace, Charles and Camilla continue pushing their vision of a controlled, streamlined monarchy. Away from that center, a different group has formed. Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Sophie, supported quietly by William and Catherine, not operating loudly, holding a line, protecting what was built before and refusing to let it be rewritten. Staff are choosing sides. Documents and private discussions are sitting closer to public exposure than they have in years. And the relationship between Charles and Edward has changed permanently. The public will see unity at state occasions. They will see 2 brothers standing side by side. But inside the family, everyone knows what is real. One of them had to use the law to protect himself from the other. That does not go away. It shapes everything that follows. Here is where everything stands now. Prince Edward's position at Bagshot Park is legally confirmed and unbreakable. The anthem tiara remains in Sophie's exclusive possession exactly as Elizabeth gave it. Charles received a written legal opinion from his own lawyers telling him he had lost. Princess Anne's warning about the credibility of royal signatures stopped the pressure campaign in its tracks. And a formal note sits in the palace archives confirming that a claim was made against the Edinburgh household, and it failed. That note will outlast everyone involved, and when it is read in the future, it will be clear what it means. Queen Elizabeth made deliberate decisions at the end of her life about what she wanted protected and for whom. She had her husband witness the most important of those decisions as he was dying because she knew exactly what would be needed. Prince Philip saw this coming. That is why he signed. This has been the Marquee Report. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. See you on the next one.